Um, I had a really interesting thought this morning that I've had before, and it's sort of like a thing that I've been feeling and sensing as I've, especially having a daughter, having a child, really kind of like brings this up in a kind of vivid way. But there was something. So there's something that This is something I've learned from working with a fantastic therapist. Katie and I have a couples therapist whom we just love. The guy is amazing, and he has just brought a lot of clarity to all sorts of stuff between us and also individually for each of us. And one of the things he says, this is all in the context of like the kinds of patterns and whatnot that we develop. One of the things he says is that there's kind of a rule about psychological development up to a certain age. When you're a child, there's basically a rule that says the world cannot be wrong, which means anything that happens, especially things that go wrong, if someone gets angry at me, if something bad happens, we attribute it to ourselves. We assume that we are the cause. The problem can't be in the world. The problem must be with me. A parent is mad at us, the problem must be with me. We're getting disapproval, the problem must be me. My dad is yelling at my mom, the problem must be me. Literally anything that sort of impinges on us emotionally and psychologically, we have no choice but to attribute it to ourselves, because we're so fused with other beings and we're not differentiated enough to kind of understand cause and effect and to really understand what's happening. So we just assume everything is us. And this is obviously how tons and tons of patterns get formed, because it starts being like, oh, well, I need to do this to accommodate this scary thing that one of my parents does, or I need to behave in such a way as to get love, and the way that I've experienced that is by doing X. And so all of a sudden patterns are formed, and now we believe that this is the way the world is, and of course we grow up and a lot of times don't let that stuff go. And there's something in that kind of like total innocence that I have come to recognize, both in looking back over my own life and in kind of observing my own patterns and seeing how I've seen other people when I was younger, and also in observing Annalise, my daughter, which is that essentially there's a period of time during which we basically believe, maybe not consciously, but subconsciously, for all intents and purposes, we believe our parents are gods. We don't, they're these magical beings that provide for all of our needs. They do all this stuff that we have no idea how they do it. We don't understand their behavior really, but we know that for whatever reason, they're the ones keeping us alive, and without them, we would die. And that's literally true. As a young child, you would have no food, you'd have no shelter. Without your parents, you would die. So we have this relationship to them that's literally like divinity. Even though we may not think of it in those terms, that's how we relate to like a force that's just so beyond what we can comprehend that it's essentially like being a god. And what I've noticed is, then you grow up and like you realize your parents aren't gods, you realize other people in your life aren't gods and goddesses, and but there's a whole way in which I've kind of, there's also, it's not just parents, it's like cousins, older brothers, there's all kinds of relationships where there's just someone who's so far beyond that we're like, wow, we're just kind of like blinded by them. We're just like totally in awe of them. And as I've looked over my own life, I've obviously seen some of the ways in which, that relationship to my parents was at play, that relationship to other people was at play. I've looked, at this point, I've looked over phases of my life when I've sort of been that to other people, to siblings or to other, younger family members usually, kind of thing. And, as we kind of reckon with that and learn to differentiate, then there's a whole process of kind of like learning new patterns, learning new ways of satisfying the emotional needs that used to be taken care of by these old patterns. And there's also kind of a way in which, it's I will say I find it interesting to look over my own life and sort of look at what kind of a God was I to my younger siblings. Usually when I look, I see room for improvement. And what kind of a God am I being for my daughter? What am I teaching her about the world, about the way the world responds when she gets upset, when she wants something and can't have it? What am I teaching her? How am I relating to someone who essentially, for all intents and purposes, I'm all powerful to her? And I just feel like this has kind of been clicking around in my mind, because there's an immense power, of course, that comes with that, and there's also a kind of humility that comes with it, because obviously we also know we're going to fall out of the sky one day, and whoever's holding us in that way is going to figure it out, and they're going to realize that we're human. But at that point, the imprinting will have happened. At that point, the patterns, the substrates are there. That's there. There's even a weird way in which I think as adults we still relate to some people as God. We just see people and they seem to have powers, and the thought is, I could never do that. I am not as divine. I don't have as much whatever as they do. And of course, that's another thing that at some point it goes. When you recognize there is no more divinity in anybody than me, and that psychological disconnect between, I don't know, whatever, someone talented, someone who's famous, someone who seems like they're just on another level somehow. When that goes away and you realize, oh no, we're all human, we're all completely equal, and in a sense, we're all gods in training. There's a beautiful, beautiful way in which, it's a poem by Hafiz that I couldn't find. I actually found a different poem, but there's a poem where he talks about everybody is gods in training, and Annalise is a god in training. She's her own little infinity who's going to grow up and become that for someone else someday. And so there's the phrase from Hafiz that I loved was when he says we're all gods in training. But I found a poem where he says something that also speaks to this idea. It's called "You Were Brave in That Holy War," and I'm just going to read this poem just because I love it. It says, "You have done well in the contest of madness. You were brave in that holy war. You have all the honorable wounds of one who has tried to find love where the beautiful bird does not drink. May I speak to you like we are close and locked away together? Once I found a stray kitten, and I used to soak my fingers in warm milk. It came to think I was 5 mothers on one hand. Wayfarer, why not rest your tired body? Lean back and close your eyes. Come morning, I will kneel by your side and feed you. I will so gently spread open your mouth and let you taste something of my sacred mind and life. Surely there is something wrong with your ideas of God. Oh, surely there's something wrong with your ideas of God if you think our beloved would not be so tender." And yeah, that kind of says it. That kind of says it. What kind of a God do we want to be? Thanks, folks. I love you all. See you next time.